Welcome to the Tech Simple podcast. Independent insights into the latest AV technologies, as well as tips and best practices to optimize AV solutions for modern workplace and learning environments. Here are your hosts, David and Jonathan from Konnectus AV Consulting.
Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the Tech Simple podcast. I'm Jonathan Cuthbertson, and as always, I'm joined by my good friend and colleague, David Allara. Welcome, David.
Hey, Jono. Yep. Great to be with you again. This is part two of that, really interesting discussion we've been having with Greg Jeffries. How have you found it so far?
We had a very robust discussion, and I'm glad to see that, there's a view that while it's simple to use technology, there are other considerations outside of the technology sphere, which I think are very important to deliver the optimal user experience.
Yeah, user experience is what it's all about in this conversation, and I think it is so important. It really is great to have an industry leader like Greg, who's got so much experience, decades really, and understands exactly what makes sense and what doesn't. So look, without further ado, let's continue the conversation. Let's talk visual video viewing experience. This, I think, is definitely a wheelhouse of yours, Greg. Gosh, where would we start? Where would we start? Visual displays, projection is something you've got quite a lot of experience and viewpoints on. What are your thoughts on telling us more?
Well, I mean, from a consulting perspective, I'm completely agnostic about it. But in a specific aspect, with regard to displays now, that the move to hybrid, and particularly Microsoft's influence on that has had is that we've now moved. Once upon a time, whatever the content was, the Excel sheet, the PowerPoint, that would be synonymous with the display size. Mm-hmm. But the one thing I think is often overlooked is that we've moved away from that now. We're now in the realms of multiple content windows, mm-hmm. and the main content window is but one window on so on a Teams room display. You've got the gallery, you've got the chat. Yep. You've got the reactions, and so that the main content window is a small proportion of the overall display, and once might have seemed to be a really big display, like a 98-inch flat panel on a wall. Mm-hmm. When you actually look at the content window, that'll be less than a 60-inch display, right? And the AVIXA Disca standard that I led 10 years or so ago, we're now updating that within AVIXA to respect the this new change. I mean, display design is absolute room design 101, because if the woman or guy at the back of the room cannot see and engage with the content, then it doesn't matter how fancy everything is, because in the end it's about transacting the meeting. Can you see, can you hear, and can you do it? So the display size, getting that right is really important, and this is why Microsoft have moved to projection, and specifically ambient light rejecting projection, because a lot of people have got quite kind of jaded views about projection, because they're kind of used to seeing underpowered projectors onto a white wall or a white screen, mm-hmm. and of course that just won't hack it. You've got to have display quality displays, and therefore you have to use projection material that is black or near black until the projected light hits it. But this basic need for having a much larger display size, moving to this concept of the digital canvas. So you've got this large canvas, we call it a digital canvas because it needs to be future proof. Because one thing is for sure on a Teams room display, on the Zoom displays, is whatever the screen layout is right now, that will evolve. and more user choice will come in. So it's just about the need to kind of for this absolute step change in thinking about what the display size needs to be. And for the moment, the cost per square meter of ambient light rejecting laser projection, that hits the sweet spot for the most part. I've got projects where we are using 0.6 millimeter dvLEDs for displays, but these are for very, these are displays costing like £500,000 or something.
Yeah.
And as far as I understand it, most people haven't got that for their meeting rooms. So it's kind of like it's well, what can we do? I'm respectful of all of the three main technologies that we use for it. It's horses for courses. It's about the right thing for the right application. But like I say, it's all been driven by this need to have much larger real estate, much larger screen size.
And that's really driven by the type of content being displayed. It's no longer, as you say, a single piece of content, but we have multiple pieces of content that we're consuming. So, on that layout that you're talking about from Microsoft, you've got a large portion in the center that's allocated for your spreadsheet or your PowerPoint or whatever it is you're presenting from your desktop. But then, people raise their hand. How do you display that in a room environment? On your desktop, it's easy to see because it pops up in a little notification. But how do you translate that into a meeting room type environment? Okay, well, so now you need to carve out part of your display to show that.
Yeah.
And people are sitting on their computer and they're typing in the chat. If you're in the meeting room, how do you know what's happening in the chat? How do you consume that? So we're getting these other pieces of content, which, as you say, you used to have a 65-inch screen, 75-inch screen. If you try and put all of those things onto that size screen, all of a sudden, each element is very small.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think it's like Pandora's box. Once people have seen a display at the proper size, then it's a step they don't want to go back from. Yeah, but I think you're absolutely right.
And I know you've got a view on dual screen, Greg. I'd love you to share it because I think there are still so many end users out there that are just a little bit stuck on the past, where you've got to have your content on the left and your people on the right, or vice versa, and that's the way it's got to be done. And we don't really care what you think, and whether it's a wide room or a narrow room, that's what we have to have. Over to you, Greg.
Well, I'll say it tongue in cheek, but I think dual screens are the work of the devil. They just really don't work for meeting spaces. That basic configuration thing where you've got the two displays. Well, where do you can't have the centered content window. You're going to have it on one favored side or another favored side. And if you look at because you've got this kind of like times two factor involved with the two displays, is that according to Discas, the image size is it's predicated upon image height. It's all around image height or display height. For every unit of measurement that you increase the height of the screen, it doubles out when it pushes wide, when you've got two displays rather than one display. And if you look, all you need to do is just look at any little illustration of a twin screen system, and you can see typically it's tiny relative to the people at the back of the space. I mean, I kind of, again, half joking, but I mean the cheap seats typically are the ones closer to the screen. It's the VIPs who sit at the head of the table, and they're getting and they are effectively in the cheap seats because the screens are too small for them. Also, if you look at any of the the kind of diagrams that are there and any of the visualizations, is that, if you've got those twin screens, is that the people at the front of the table are blocking the view of the people at the back of the table. So those are my headline reasons for making my joke about it being the work of the devil. But really, honestly, I think it is all about the digital canvas. I think we haven't got crystal balls. We can't look into the future, but what we do know, and what we take it for granted, is that things will change. Screens layout will change, and you want to leave the door open for people to have as much flexibility in the future. And that's basically about putting the best single, the largest best single image size that you can put up there. That's the kind of the principle that I work to.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And it's sort of coming back to what we're talking about with audio. We're just going back to basic needs. How do we ensure that everybody in the room can comfortably see what they're supposed to see? And they're not sort of moving their chairs around and dodging people's heads who are in the way, and straining their eyes or what have you. Because if any of that is happening, then clearly it's been a fail for whoever the designer was for that system.
Yeah. No, I'm not a fan of twin displays.
What are you seeing from Microsoft at the moment, which you really like, and or maybe is on their roadmap, which you're really excited about? Just off the, I don't know if you've seen anything.
Well, Microsoft themselves are very excited about the whole AI, Copilot thing, which interests me as well. But I think the Teams environment has to be regarded in a different way to kind of to Zoom and BlueJeans and WebEx and all of the other platforms, because Microsoft, the kind of the symptom of this is the frequency of the upgrades and that are being continuously released for Teams. And this is because my suggestion is that this is because the Teams has to fit within a massive ecosystem, Microsoft ecosystem, and it's not a standalone thing. If it was a standalone thing, then the plus side of that is that would release Microsoft to be able to take a more simple approach. I just look for this strong organic approach that they have. I like it that they continue to think about the space configuration. You don't see so much about it now, but they're still doing a lot of work at the Hive, looking at new space layouts. Microsoft's focus now, I feel, is on the cheaper rooms. I've been I've co-presented and with Michelle Bauman, their kind of EMEA guru over here. And you hear the Microsoft guys saying, well, that of meeting rooms are only around, maybe I forget what the number is, but it's incredible. About 15% of them are video enabled. And I think there's a huge excitement with Microsoft for these sub $1,000 systems. I don't know what that converts into Australian dollars, but there's a kind of a bit of a paradox within Microsoft, David, because we are talking about this conversation is about how you do a room well, how you do it nicely. As far as Microsoft are concerned, they're going, well, that's all very well, but we actually need to get all rooms equipped in one way or another. And in the Microsoft ecosystem, it's all all of the success KPIs are predicated about numbers, the numbers of licenses that are sold. So you asked that question, but I also have to be very aware that we kind of this conversation is happening, if you like, at a kind of at a higher end of the food chain. Whereas, what we're talking about now are the best practice principles, as you're saying, but how they can flow down to kind of just a normal low cost meeting room, how that flows down.
Now that's very true, and it's probably a reason. I don't know what you're finding in the UK or amongst your client base, but we're definitely seeing, and Jonathan, you could attest to this, we're definitely seeing more and more end clients really just trying to do this themselves, just trying to buy the equipment or kind of design the systems themselves, because the marketing is literally saying, hey, it's so simple. Why wouldn't you do it yourself? Why wouldn't you just go buy this bundle, install it in your room, or have an electrician install it in your room, and away you go? Are you seeing that trend happening more and more?
Yeah, it's a funny thing, really, because in a way, because we're seeing IT, UC, AV specialists in this space, and the lens that I'd see it through, or I'll use as an example, is that in many ways I think the AV industry is shooting itself in the foot, whereas the traditional strengths of the AV industry is that the IT guys would take the signal to the boxes on the wall, and then it will be the AV people who would turn that into the 3D sensory experience and delivering the sound, delivering the image, and so on. And that's where the baby gets thrown out with the bathwater, and it kind of leads us back to the provenance of it all. When we made this rapid switch to hybrid in the first place. And I think it's that lack of, and it's that, in a way, it's a collusion of the AV industry to kind of that effectively supports that view that you can get some electrician in to put in one of the vendor's systems. I'm trying hard to avoid saying brand names here. Whatever brand I said, other brands are also available. No, I think there's just a kind of like a general collusion of pushing those of like not push of just like pretending those design principles don't exist. And for people who put their toe in the water and then become power users later on, it's I've got another biblical reference coming here. It's like sin in haste and repent at leisure. Because it's like when people buy domestic grade TVs to use as displays, and then when they fall over, they've got that expensive mistake to put back. It's but it's such a mixed picture out there, isn't it?
There's a few competing ideas here, and I think you touched on it before, Greg, when you said one of the key performance metrics for the Microsoft team is the number of licenses. So they're focused on deploying as many rooms as possible, regardless of the quality. So you've got that being presented to end users. And Microsoft and others like them, Cisco and other large players, are also singing the same kind of tune to their end users and saying, yes, it's simple, we can deploy it everywhere, and hey, we've got these magical AI and advanced functionalities in our systems that will take care of everything. But the reality is that that's not the case. But I think there's a risk, if everybody continues to listen to low quality MP3s and haven't listened to original CD or a vinyl recording in a very long time, they've forgotten what that sounds like. Yeah. And they've forgotten what the experience could be.
Yeah.
And until they hear it or see it or experience it, they don't realize what's missing.
I think you're so right, Jonathan, because in practice, when a client goes into their room, their space for the first time, it's a surprise. The experience is going to be a surprise. This is our day job for us guys here on this conversation. So if we talk about a certain system in a certain space, in our kind of mind's eye, we can kind of see and feel what it kind of might look like. Whereas for an typical end user, that they just don't have the benefit of that. And when they walk into the space, so when she or he walks into that space, it's a surprise, and you hope it's going to be a nice surprise, but of course, very often it's not. And I think a key part of the process, where of course speed and the general urgency of life gets in the way, is that you need to try before you buy. You actually do need to kind of like sit down in front of a display, sit down in an audio system, and make those choices. Because once people do, because like you say, if you you put someone in a room with a nice vinyl system, proper loudspeakers, listen to that. Okay, then take them next door and have them play some MP3 off their iPhones or some other BYOD device, and go, okay, now which one do you want? And of course, if people were put in that situation, then it would be a very different answer than when they're looking at it on an Excel sheet, when they go, no, I want that one because it's cheaper. Thank you very much.
Yeah. No, it is a tough one. I guess it's just something we're going to have to learn to work with. I feel this is something that Jonathan and I have been talking about recently. I feel there's detriment to brand is now becoming a thing, because you go to market quickly with options that are relatively basic and straightforward. It would seem on the surface. But that doesn't necessarily mean the acoustics in the room are good, the display size is the correct one, the camera's in the correct location. You can still have, and I'll quote something from one of your one of your posts on LinkedIn. Bill of materials are not standards, they're shopping lists. One company might create an exceptional user experience with a bill of materials. Another might create a total pig's ear from exactly the same package. So, you can have professionals and not professionals in anything. But I think the more that, the manufacturers are pushing this thing or this idea, hey, it's easy, you could even do it yourself. You don't need great time and effort put into design or anything like that. Guess who's getting the support calls when things aren't all that great? It's those same companies. Their brand name is on the piece of hardware. So I just don't really understand that as an idea, but it is interesting to observe.
Yeah, no, I think, and of course, the other thing you're touching on there, David, is the whole thing about standards. And standards, it's been meat and drink for me most of my professional life, but it's actually it's understandable, but nevertheless frustrating, because that word standard is misused, and actually having some clarity about what you do mean by it, because you've got various types of standards. You've got quality standards, you've got deployment standards. And then you've got best practices and BOMs, bills of material. They're not a standard, or they might be part of they might be a subset of a deployment standard. And I think that that actually having some clarity about what that means, and and how they reflect, or how they can be used to capture and reflect user needs, is a really important part of this.
Well, I have a feeling the three of us could probably go on and on and on, but we all have other things to do, and so do our listeners. So I would like to wrap up and just quickly touch on, you've got a book, Greg, which I believe is in the works. Can you tell us a little bit about it? What's it called? What's it about? When's it going to be released?
Well, yeah, thank you. So, all of the work I did in starting in the pandemic, and the webinars I did, and the articles I've written for magazines and these LinkedIn posts, I decided that I was going to pull it together into a book about the design of hybrid meeting and teaching spaces. But I'm working with a lovely editor, my friend Anne Brigida, who used to be the director of standards at AVIXA. And what we've decided to do with the book now is we're editing it down with very much a bias towards Microsoft Teams rooms.
Okay.
And we're not talking so much about the technology, but we are talking about the room functionalities. But what we're really talking about is the design of the space itself, because there are a lot of stakeholders involved that we're hoping it's going to be helpful for. For end users, for architects, for the facilities management, for AV consultants. It's such, the world that we live in is such a multidisciplinary thing. I just really wanted to have a book that would really kind of address the basics. But what we're going to be doing with it to start with is it'll appear first as an ebook. And then, depending on negotiations with other people, that it will get hopefully published as a paper book later on. But the one of the key issues there is that the book will contain a lot of the training and teaching materials that we also have, and that will fit into both training sessions and facilitated sessions that we run in the consulting practice.
Oh, fantastic! And when do you expect that to be released? The ebook version?
Oh God, that's a good question. Well, I think we hope to get the I'd like to get the ebook out in time for the Infocom show in June. But I said that in my out loud voice, so we'll just have to
now
when it happens.
Now it's a milestone that must be met. No delays. The pressure's on.
And in the meanwhile, I do highly recommend if you do want to get some inside information, Greg is an avid LinkedIn poster, and you can glean a lot of great information if you follow him on LinkedIn. I know I do, and really enjoy reading his articles and posts.
That's 100%.
That's really
true.
kind, Jonathan. Doing those posts has been a really lovely thing for me, because I've had such great feedback and great engagement from people. It makes me feel when I'm here in my desk in my study, it makes me feel very, very connected. It's really kind of you to say that. I also wanted to thank you guys for inviting me onto the podcast. It's been a real buzz talking with you, and I feel we are kindred spirits. So like you say, we could probably be 3 hours later, we could still be here.
Absolutely. No, it has been our pleasure. Obviously, people can find you on LinkedIn. You have a website, which is also a treasure trove of information. What's that address?
So the Visual Displays website is Visual Displays Ltd, visualdisplayslimited.com.
Yep.
And my consulting site is gjconsult.co.uk.
Amazing. Well, we highly recommend listeners to reach out to Greg for anything in the AV space, especially in the UK. But you work all around the world, I'm assuming, Greg.
Yeah. I've got a meeting today for a client based in Singapore. So have laptop, will travel.
There you go. Excellent. All right. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks, Jono, once again. And we look forward to chatting with you on another future episode, perhaps, Greg.
Yeah, I hope so. That was a real blast. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Tech Simple podcast. To like, share, or discover more episodes, head over to Spotify. If you'd like to talk to us about AV in your workplace or learning environment, book an initial discovery call with David or Jonathan at konnectus.com.au. And remember, Tech Simple!